Hello, good morning. My name is Jessica Peterson, and I would like to welcome everyone to today's WED Talk, How to Build an Award-Winning Culture. Before we kick off our WED Talk today, I would like to introduce the Director of Workforce and Economic Development for the County of Bucks, Billy Barnes. Thank you for joining us today, Billy.
Thank you for the introduction, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. I'm Billy Barnes, Executive Director of Workforce and Economic Development. On behalf of the Bucks County Workforce Development Board and the county, I want to welcome everyone to WED Talks. Today's discussion focuses on one of the hottest topics in human resources, the direct relationship between company culture and employee engagement. Most organizations agree that employee engagement and culture are two of their most vital workplace challenges. A positive work culture promotes productivity, engagement, and improved employee experience. Organizations that practice an engaged culture see their employees happy, productive, and open. As a result, such workplaces are able to retain their top talent and grow at a much faster rate. And that's what today's discussion will reveal. By joining our WED Talk today, you are ready to take actionable steps to improve your company's culture and increase overall employee satisfaction. Let's introduce our expert who will lead today's discussion. Back to you, Jess.
Thanks, Billy. I am pleased to introduce our WED Talk presenter, Kevin Watson. Kevin serves as the Director of Customer Experience at EDSI, a national workforce development, talent solutions, and consulting company, helping great companies and communities train and retain great people. Since joining EDSI in 2010, Watson has been instrumental in helping to pilot the company's external customer satisfaction surveys and internal employee satisfaction surveys. He currently spearheads various customer experience and employee experience initiatives and is passionate about analyzing and synthesizing the data to identify bright spots and aha moments. Watson is happiest when organizations create a more desirable workplace for their employees because the ripple effect can be profound. These employees ultimately leave work and contribute to the company as happier and better individuals. Fun fact, EDSI is only 5 companies in the state of Michigan to win the following awards for 7 consecutive years: Crane's Cool Place to Work, Free Press Top Workplaces, Metro Detroit's Best and Brightest to Work For, and the Best and Brightest Companies to Work For in the nation. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for leading our discussion today.
Yeah, thank you, Jess, so much. And thank you, Billy, and the team at Bucks County for inviting me. I am super passionate about this topic. So what I want to do real quickly is just leave this screen up for another second. My cell phone number is on here. My email address is on here. I'll give everybody just a moment to jot that down. If you have any questions on the heels of this presentation, you can pick up the phone and call me. You can shoot me an email. We won't charge you anything, obviously, but we're super passionate about helping other companies move the needle related to this topic. So I'm happy to carve out some time to answer any additional questions that we don't get through today. All right, perfect. So today we're going to talk about how to build an award-winning culture, either on-site or virtually. And I should probably throw hybrid in there. When I used to do this training pre-COVID, I would do this in person and never really had to think through the different workplace dynamics, right? Almost all of the employers at that time had a 100% on-site workplace culture. You know, now we have companies that have on-site, virtual, hybrid. So everything I'm going to share with you today, I wanted to make sure we could pass it through the lens of the current state. And I feel like everything that I'm going to talk about can be accomplished regardless of whether we're on-site, virtual, or hybrid. You know, as Jess mentioned, you know, we are one of the only companies here in Michigan where we continue to win all of the awards for workplace culture, you know, the Free Press Top Workplaces, the Crane's Cool Places to Work, the Best and Brightest. But we've also won a lot of awards nationally and in the Pennsylvania area as well. And I don't say that to be boastful. But I do say that because in the 12 years I've been within in the organization, in the role that I've been in, I've had a front row seat for the intentionality in everything that goes on behind the scenes with our chief servant leader, with our chief talent officer, with our talent team, with our local leaders. So I can't take credit for any of this, but I have had a front row seat for 12 years. So I can kind of give you a peek behind the curtain about what we have done as an organization to really move the needle in this area, with the hopes that you can go back and take one or two of these concepts back to your organization, and quickly move the needle in these areas. And so if you ever visit our Dearborn office, we have 2 trophy cases that are bursting at the seams. We've actually run out of room because we continue to win these awards. And again, I don't say that to be proud or boastful, but it does, from my experience, bleed into how we treat our customers, how we treat our colleagues, how we go back home, and how we treat our significant others and our children, and how we interact in the community as well. So it can have a huge ripple effect. So the slide I'm showing you here may look like a bunch of gobbledygook. It's just a bunch of numbers, but what each of these numbers represent is a person. And the numbers more specifically represent the tenure, how long those individuals have been with our organization. So I work out of our Dearborn office in Michigan, and each of these numbers represent one of my colleagues in our Dearborn office and the amount of time they've been with the organization. I've been with EDSI for 12 years, and as you can see, in most organizations, I would be one of the more tenured individuals. I'm still a newbie. There are the vast majority of the folks that I work with on a daily basis out of our Dearborn office have been there significantly longer than I have. And that's a real testament to the workplace culture and the intentionality at which our CEO or chief servant leader has designed this workplace culture. And so if you look at it in 12 years, I was trying to go back through, I think this is fairly accurate. I think I've seen 8 colleagues in Dearborn leave the organization. 4 of those retired, many of whom had been with the organization 20, 25 years. One of those individuals came back. So they left and then they came back. So in the 12 years I've been here, when you take away the person that boomeranged back to us and the 4 people that retired, I've seen 3 people leave the organization in 12 years. And so why is that important? You don't have to spend a ton of time and energy onboarding, upskilling, getting people ramped up to speed. And more importantly, you create an extension of your immediate family, right? So we show up in mass to funerals, to weddings, to baby showers. So we really wrap our arms around one another. And this isn't lip service. Deanna, who's on this call, and all of our other colleagues in Dearborn truly do feel like an extension of my family. And so, Jess talked a little bit about that ripple effect. I put a lot of thought into why that was important. And I thought back to when my kids were younger. I live about, in the morning, if I left early enough, I would usually leave the office or my home about 10 after 6. And it'd take me about 50 minutes to get to work in the morning. And with traffic, it would take about an hour and a half to get home. And so I have 2 boys, they're 6 and 8 now, but when they were younger, I would leave in the morning, they'd still be sleeping. I'd get home and they had relatively early bedtime. So I would spend more time in the car every day than I would spend with our 2 boys during the work week. And if I didn't love EDSI's culture, I would have left and I would have went somewhere else. It would have been a no-brainer. But I stayed with the organization in large part because of the culture that we created. And so in theory, right, if you can create a workplace and an environment where people get excited to go to and they're excited to be around their colleagues and they feel like they're doing meaningful and purposeful work, in theory, they will go home and they will be happier and better spouses and parents and sons and daughters and neighbors and patrons in the community. So we really can have a huge ripple effect. And we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our employees to create that environment for them. And so, if you're like some of our consulting clients that I've worked with over the years, anytime we talk about culture with some of our customers, they're like, that's a little too warm and fuzzy. Like, that's great, but we're more focused on profitability and revenue growth and sales and those types of things. So what I'll tell you is, as we have put an emphasis on culture, we have grown dramatically. And I would argue we have grown much more rapidly because of the culture we created. I think if we shortchanged the culture and focused on growth, we wouldn't be where we are today. So in the 12 years I've been here, we've had over 300% growth. And right now we have top line revenue of over $85 million. And so what I love is, we work in workforce development, so the margins aren't great, but we reinvest back into our people, whether that's merit increases, better paid time off, maternity and paternity leave, whether that's increasing our benefits. We're looking at improving our 401k match and those types of things. So as we're able to grow, we're able to reinvest that back into the organization to hopefully make this an even better and more enjoyable place for our employees to work. So I say both those things to say, if you have leaders within your organization, or you are a leader in your organization that values kind of the warm and fuzzy culture side, you can do it for altruistic reasons. But if you have some leaders in your organization, or you're one of these folks who are more numbers and metrics driven, you can pass it through that lens and it'll get you the same result. So I was trying to, in preparation for this presentation, I was thinking about all of the things that we're currently doing or have done over the years to really help drive that workplace culture. And I could talk to you about 100 different things, but paralysis would kick in and you wouldn't have anything actionable to go back and implement. So I wanted to take kind of a less is more approach and talk to you about just a couple of things today, rather than just throwing a bunch of stuff at you. And so what I want to do is I want to focus on 3 core concepts today. And this is based on conversations and interactions that I had with our CEO. I said, Kevin, if you were me and you were trying to distill everything that we have done over the years, or you have done and we've done as an organization, what do you think the 3 most important things are? Kind of the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. What are those 20% of the activities or things we've been focused on that achieve 80% of the outcomes? And he didn't have to spend much time on it at all. He said it's our core values. We call them our daily ways. It's clarity, consistency, and cadence, right? It's being clear, it's being consistent, and having a cadence of communication, and then making it personal. And so before we jump in, I want you to remember, this is a marathon and not a sprint. If your workplace culture isn't where you or your colleagues would like for it to be today, you're not going to change that tomorrow or next week or next month. You could do some things that'll have a dramatic impact, but it is a longer kind of starting with the end in mind and working backwards, kind of reverse engineering the process. It is more of a marathon than a sprint. So it's going to take commitment. It's going to take some time and intentionality. So I want you to remember that. And I want you to remember that because I don't want you to get discouraged if you don't see a dramatic improvement out of the gate, because you have to stay with it. I think sometimes, whether it's diet, exercise, things like that, people give up right before they're going to start seeing the outcomes. The other thing I want you to remember is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If your employees can't pay their bills, they can't keep the light and the heat and the gas on, they don't have reliable transportation because they can't afford it, if they don't feel safe and secure coming to work, you have to address those things first. We've worked with some customers over the years, one manufacturing environment, and in the summertime it would get up north of 100 degrees, and they would have 2 or 3 oscillating fans for the entire manufacturing floor. And people were literally getting in fist fights fighting over these fans. So somebody would walk off of their the machine that they were operating. They'd walk to the other side of the plant, they'd unplug the fan and they'd bring it back because people were having heat strokes. People were getting dehydrated and people were passing out. And so you can't focus on some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about if people are having heat strokes at work. And that's an extreme example, but I want you thinking about those types of things. Are there some low-lying fruit opportunities that you guys can do to move the needle in those bottom two rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? And then we can start to move on to the love and belonging, self-esteem, self-actualization. The other thing that I want you to remember is culture starts at the top. And so we absolutely need to have buy-in at the highest levels of the organization. Can local leaders and frontline staff move the needle? Absolutely. But if they feel like they're swimming upstream, it's going to be much, much more difficult to actually implement that to the levels that you'd like for it to. All right, so I'm going to jump in. That was all kind of a prelude to what we're going to talk about. I want to talk about core values and what we call our daily ways. And so I want you to humor me. In non-COVID times, I'd be doing this presentation, we'd all be in a room, and I would have everybody line up along one wall, and I would ask them to imagine that they're a sprinter and they're a hurdler. So I would ask them a question. If they answer yes, they would take one giant step forward, pretend like they're leaping over a hurdle, and move forward in the room. And so I would ask a series of questions, and at the end of it, we would look to see how many people still had their back against the wall, how many people had taken one step, how many people had taken two steps, how many people were on the opposite side of the room. And so even though we're not in person and I can't see you, so I have to trust you, I'm going to ask you to just pick a wall in whatever room that you're in and pretend, I want you to imagine that your back is against that wall. And once you've done that, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. If you answer no, I want you to just, in your mind, stay in that spot. If you answer yes, I want you to imagine yourself progressing through that room. So the first question is, does your company have core values? If the answer is yes, again, I want you to imagine taking one giant step forward. If the answer is no, I want you to imagine standing still against that wall. Could you personally tell me those core values and get them 100% correct right now on the spot without cheating, without looking at your website, without looking at a business card, without doing any of those things? Could you tell me your company's core values and get them 100% accurate today, right now on the spot without cheating? If the answer is yes, I want you to take one giant step forward. If the answer is no, I want you to stay still. If we asked 100% of the people in your organization, not 80, not 90, not 99, but 100% of the people in the organization, and we asked them all to write down the company's core values at the same time, would 100% of those people write down the exact same thing? If the answer is yes, I want you to take one giant step forward. No. Now the next question, do you hire, train, motivate, and retain based on those core values? The answer is yes, one giant step forward. If the answer is no, I want you to stay still. And so again, I have no idea how many of you progressed how far, how many of you stood still, after question 1 or 2. But usually when we do this in person, it looks kind of like this. We've got a lot of people with their backs against the wall. We've got a few people that took 1 or 2 steps. We may have one person that ends up on the other side of the room. Oftentimes, those are somebody from our organization that happened to be in the room. And so I want us thinking about those things. And so I'm going to do one other activity. I'm going to give you exactly 60 seconds to memorize. I want you to review these core values. This is a real company. These are their core values. I want you to remember, try and memorize as many of these core values as you can. I'm going to give you 60 seconds starting now, and then I'm going to ask you to recall as many as you can after that. So ready, go. All right. Now I'm going to give you another 60 seconds, and I want you to either write down or kind of call out in your brain as many of those core values as you can remember. And I want you to be honest with yourself. Afterwards, I'm going to ask you to type in the number that you got correct in the chat. So we're going to give you 60 seconds starting now. All right. I'd like for you, if you could type in the chat how many of those core values you got correct. So if you could type them in, and Deanna, if you see some responses coming through, if you could just shout out a couple of the numbers that you see come through.
Sure. I see 5, 5, 6, 4, 4, 7, 5, 6, 5, another 6. Someone said they can't see the slide anymore to know that they are right though, but that's
Perfect.
okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when we do this in person, I usually have a big kind of 3M Post-it note size thing on the board, and we'll create, and it usually makes a bell graph. Usually there aren't many people that get 0 or 1 or 2. You'll get some 4s, you get a lot of 5s and 6s, you get a few 7s, you maybe get an 8, and you get very few, if any, 9s, 10s, 11, etc. So this is exactly what we typically see. So now I want you to look at these core values. I'm going to give you, we've got a lot to get through, so we'll go 50 seconds for each of these. Starting now, I want you to look at these for 50 seconds. I'll go to the white screen, and I want you to remember as many as you can. So starting now. All right. So we'll stop, and then I'm going to give you 50 seconds to remember, write down as many of these as you can, starting now. All right, so we'll have everybody stop. Again, if you could just put in the chat how many you remembered, and I'll throw these up so you can reconcile your responses with the actual responses. And Dee, if you could just read those off, that'd be great.
Sure. We have 7, 4, 6, 7, 5, 4, 7, 6.
Perfect. So we've got a couple people that got all of them right, but a lot in the 4 to 6 range. Is that fair?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So now we'll give you 30 seconds on this one. I want you to look at this screen for 30 seconds, and then we'll do the same activity. And I want you to see how many of these you can remember. All right. So now we'll give you another 30 seconds to remember those. I don't think you'll need the entire time, but all right. If we can type in the chat how many of those we remembered. And then Dan, if you're seeing responses
Sure.
come through, can you shout them out?
Yep. We've got 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 3, 3, 3, 4. Show up, smile, and support. Someone put in there.
Perfect. Awesome. So I don't want to belabor the point, but there is a very real thing. So a Harvard psychologist years ago identified what he calls the magical number of 7 plus or minus 2. And so it's one of the most highly cited papers in psychology. And what he found is that the average human can hold in short-term memory up to 7 numbers plus or minus 2. So anywhere from 5 to 9. So that's why zip codes are the lengths that they are. That's why phone numbers have prefixes and why phone numbers are the length that they are. So the human's capability for short-term memory, we're not going to remember 15, 16, 20 different things. And so I'm going to go through this rapid fire, and I just want you to, in your mind, shout out what you're looking at here. Right, so we've got the Three Stooges, the Three Amigos, the Three Wise Men, the Three Tenors, Three Men and a Baby, Three Billy Goats Gruff, Three Little Pigs, Alvin, Simon, Theodore, there's 3 of them, Huey, Louie, Dewey, 3 of them, 3 branches of government. Most of the flags that we see have 3 colors on them. A lot of them are broken up into thirds. The genie in Aladdin grants 3 wishes, right? That's not by design. You know, there's something very powerful about the number 3. And so if you were to ask our chief servant leader, what's the number one thing that you've done? He said, I made our core values. I leveraged the power of 3, so it's show up, smile, support. There's an alliteration, right? So they all start with S, and it makes it really easy for people to remember those. So that's what I want us thinking about. If you have core values today, that's great. How many core values do you have? Do people actually know what they are? Can they remember them? Can they recite them? Do they mean anything? Do you hire based on core values? Do you train and retain based on core values, etc.? And if you have too many core values, is there a way for you as a leadership team or you as leaders to work to bucket those and kind of whittle those down to where you have 3 core values that everybody can rally around, everybody can recite, and it's crystal clear what those are? So that's number 1. If you don't have core values, I would work as a leadership team to define aspirationally what you want those core values to be. They have to be genuine and sincere to the organization. If they're not, people will not be able to fake it. People will pick up on the fact that it's not genuine, and people will leave the organization or they won't rally around it. So you can work together to say, okay, who are the employees that we would be devastated if they left? What attributes do they have? What do we want people to emulate? Those types of things. So you can use some of those kind of brainstorming activities to really get the ball rolling. The next thing is clarity, consistency, and cadence. So for us, what does it mean to show up, smile, support? So we put some additional clarity around that. For us, showing up means I always arrive on time. I'm the best me that I can be today. I use my judgment. I take initiative. My word is my bond. Smiling doesn't just mean, I've got a big grin on my face. It means I have a sense of wonderment. I'm self-aware. I treat my colleagues like customers. I'm a part of the solution. Supporting. I live my professional life in service to others. I love other people's perspectives. I do what's best for the blocks. EDSI has a block logo where the EDSI are in those blocks. And so that's just an homage to our logo, but it's really, I do what's best for the company. I talk with people, not about them. Consistency. If you go to our website and you're looking for a job, you're going to read about Show Up, Smile, Support. You're going to see videos about Show Up, Smile, Support. The first interview process is going to be really centered around the core values of Show Up, Smile, Support, right? We're vetting people to make sure they're a culture fit. On our website, we have our painted picture, our vision story. So our CEO does this every 3 years. So he's doing it right now for 2026. And that'll be on our website. And that's our vision of where we're going as an organization. And as you can see, the watermark behind that video or that infographic is Show Up, Smile, Support. That's our core values. So it's everywhere. In our performance reviews, I just had a performance review with our CEO last week. I have to rate myself on how well I embody the daily ways of Show Up, Smile, Support. So I have to be self-reflective to say, am I really truly embodying each of our core values of Show Up, Smile, Support? How am I doing that? How am I falling short? What could I be doing differently? We have these give one, get one EDSI coins. So they've got a decent amount of weight to them. On one side, it says Show Up, Smile, Support. On the other side, it says EDSI. So if I see somebody in our organization going above and beyond to embody our core values of Show Up, Smile, Support, I can reach out to our CEO, let him know. He will write a handwritten thank you card or note to that individual. And in the mail, he will send them 2 of these coins, one for them to keep, one for them to pass on, kind of pay it forward to somebody else, one of their other colleagues that they see embodying the daily ways of Show Up, Smile, Support. So, if you look at, if you ever played with one of these as a child, Newton's cradle, right? You grab the one ball, you let it drop, and then the other one, right? So you start to get this momentum that just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going, right? And people will start to say, oh gosh, that person really went above and beyond to Show Up, Smile, Support. And you start to catch people doing these little acts of kindness, and it starts to get legs of its own. The next is cadence, right? Our CEO, his mentor always told him, tell people until you think they're sick of you telling them, and then keep telling them. Because just when they're sick of you telling them is when it's about to sink in. So we have a cadence of communication. Every single week, all close to 900 employees in our organization get a video that touches on one of these tenets under the Show Up, Smile, Support bucket of our core values. And so these are our daily ways. And so, in August, we had Marquez, which is one of our business services and recruitment coordinators. he was talking with our chief servant leader about, I use my judgment and take initiative. And so we're giving concrete examples on what it means to show up, what it means to smile, what it means to support. It used to just be him giving examples of that, and we get a video from him every week. And for the last probably year or so, we have different people throughout the organization that he'll interview, and they're sharing what it means to them to embody the daily ways of show up, smile, support. Yeah, I should mention we also have Show Up Smile Support Awards, so people can nominate on an annual basis, and we get those. Those are a big deal. And there's a lot of other things that we do to really embody our daily ways. The next is make it personal, right? We use something called AccuMax. So for every new employee, when you come on board, it takes literally less than 60 seconds to do. You just go and you pick a bunch of words. And it seems kind of hokey, and I was skeptical of it, but then it spits out some results on your hard wiring, and then you're like, oh, this is me to a T. And so I'm paraphrasing, but the A drive is, do I want or need things my way or the team's way, right? And so there's a gradient scale. We may have somebody who's an off the charts high A in our vernacular. They're going to want to put their thumbprint on something. If somebody's a lowest A, I've had my parents take this. My mom is as far to the left as you can get. So on Mother's Day, I'll say, Mom, what do you want to do for dinner? Oh, I don't know. What do you kids want to do? I'm like, well, it's not Kids Day, it's Mother's Day, right? But she is hardwired to default to the team. Do people need to talk to crystallize their thoughts, or do they need heads down time? Do people like to do things in a sequential manner, or do they like to juggle things? Do people need a ton of data, or do they go with their gut and they don't need any data at all, right? And so we take individualized approaches to how we interact with one another based on that hard wiring. If somebody wants a ton of data and I give them a Cliff's Notes version or bullet points, they're going to be frustrated with me. On the flip side, if somebody wants the down and dirty bullet points and I send them a novel, they're going to get frustrated with me. So we take a customized approach. We have career sculpting. So if you say, gosh, I got hired in to do this role, but that's not what I want to do for the rest of my career, we'll pair you up with a career sculptor that understands your interests, your passions, what energizes you, what you want to do aspirationally, and they'll try and map out what that career path could look like. What things do you need to do from an experience standpoint? What experience do you need to get? Are there additional trainings that you need to take? Do you need to get paired up with a specific mentor? Those types of things. We have town hall meetings. So our CEO, we have dozens of different locations throughout the country. So he'll have either in-person or virtual town hall meetings where they're kind of listening sessions. And then we take customized approaches locally to try and meet the needs of those folks. He has little baseball cards for everybody in the organization where it has important information about them. Their birthdays, their work anniversary, life events, spouse's name, children's ages and names, what hobbies they're into, those types of things. Handwritten cards. So in our organization, you will get a minimum of 3 handwritten cards from our CEO every single year. And as I mentioned, we have close to 900 employees. So on your birthday, on your work anniversary, around the holidays, you'll get handwritten cards. And then if there's life events, right? If in a town hall meeting, somebody mentioned that they have a wedding coming up, or a big life event, it's not uncommon to get a birthday card or a card for that as well. So last year, 3,180 cards were sent out. So it takes a lot of time and intentionality. This, I was in the office a little while back. I just took a picture of Robin's desk. Robin is our, a receptionist. She's at our front desk. So almost every day or every week, this is what her desk looks like. When we have new employees, we send out an EDSI t-shirt that says show up, smile, support on it, because we do a lot of volunteerism in the community. We have a little laminated card that says show up, smile, support, and it has our daily ways on there. We have their AccuMax profile that they can put on their desk so people know how to best communicate with them. And then on work anniversaries, somebody might get a blanket or a fleece or a pen, depending on how long they've been with the organization. They get cards for birthdays and work anniversaries. So, you know, there is a very strategic and intentional coordinated effort. And if you ask Kevin, our CEO, he would say this is the most important thing that he does. People have these cards, people have their, show up, smile, support coins in their cubicles, on their desks. It means a lot to folks. And so I love the Maya Angelou quote, people forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And from my experience, so very true. I'll give you one bonus gift and then I'll pause and we'll do some Q&A. We have been doing this for a couple of years with our workforce boards and our consulting clients, where we send out a semi-annual satisfaction survey, 0 to 10. How likely would you be to recommend EDSI as a place to work? What one thing, if done differently, would have enhanced your experience and improved your score? And so the 9s and 10s are considered promoters, the 7s and 8 are passive, the 6 or below or non-respondents are considered detractors. And the best score you can have is a plus 100 all the way down to a negative 100, depending on what those responses are. And so we have done this twice now with our employees. So there's 44 separate links that we create, we send out. I analyze all of the results, I synthesize, I identify the common themes, and then our HR director and myself schedule debrief meetings with all of our local leaders separately to go through their individual results, their scores, what the themes were, and then they close the feedback loop and they put together a plan of action to move the needle in those areas. And so I share that because this is something you can do tomorrow. It takes time, but it doesn't cost any money. And it was really telling for us. I'll give a couple concrete examples. We had 16 responses where people talked about parking. Parking was expensive, parking was difficult, parking was challenging. And so if you just look at that on an island, you're like, oh, we should probably address this. However, we parsed it out by individual locations, and we could say 100% of the people who mentioned parking were in our St. Louis office. And the last time we did this survey, 0 people mentioned parking. So what changed? And so a couple things had changed. And so we were able to help educate them. Did you know that through our organization, as part of one of your benefits, you can get X amount of money towards parking and things like that? So it was a pain point that wasn't on our radar, but we went through this survey. Now it was on our radar. We're able to help educate them. We're able to help get resources. We're able to help put a plan in action. And if we don't do that, we may have 2 or 3 people leave because they get sick of parking, right? And that's just one minute little example. But in doing this process, we were able to look at where were our scores the greatest, where did they take a huge leap from one year to the next, where did they degrade? And so I was able to schedule debrief meetings with our local leaders who had our highest scores. And as I was doing these interviews, I felt like the movie Groundhog Day, where it was like repeating the same thing over and over again. All of our leaders who had our highest scores were doing a couple things almost identically. They had a consistent cadence for one-to-one communication. So not just a team meeting, but they said, okay, I'm meeting with this person on this date at this time every single week. It's sacred time. I don't care how busy I am. I'm not rescheduling. I'm going to be present for that individual. I'm not going to come to the table talking about performance and work and why we're behind on our numbers or any of those things. I'm going to listen. How's your family doing? What's going on in your personal life? What support do you need? How can I help best support you? It was people-centric at a real human level. And then the other thing, when they did have their team meetings, they almost always started with a structured icebreaker. So the teams got to know each other. They're having fun, they're laughing. And those are just two examples. Where our scores were the lowest, I would interview the team members and I would say, tell me about your one-to-one check-ins. They would almost always say, I think they happen once a month. I think they happen every other Thursday. I think they happen. I'd say, well, tell me, do they happen consistently? No, well, my leader's really busy. I know they have a lot on their plate. Well, when they do happen, tell me about it. Well, we talk about our numbers. We talk about why we're behind on our numbers, what we're going to do to fix it. So it was very transactional, very work-centric, but they rescheduled a lot. It wasn't sacred time. The person was multitasking or distracted, or they'd reschedule at the last moment. So those are the types of things. And then another common theme that all these leaders had in common who had our best scores, they carved out time to listen to their employees about what can we do from a process improvement standpoint. You're in the trenches every single day. You have ideas that I'm never going to think of. What are we doing that doesn't make sense today? What could we be doing more efficiently, more effectively, right? And so they become a part of the solution. They're bought in, their voice is being heard, they feel like they're more productive, right? And so you can implement this if you have multiple locations, or if you want to parse it out by leader or department. Even if you do it just as an organization as a whole, you can glean some really powerful and impactful information. The caveat, it's worse to ask and not do anything than it is to not ask at all. So if you're going to ask what you can do to get better, you have to be committed to listening, being open to that feedback, viewing it as a gift, and then making those changes. We did have some leaders that would say, well, we're already doing this, we're already doing that, or they would get defensive. Well, I can't believe those scores because of, here's what's going on, right? So we have to go into this and view this as a gift, whether we love the responses, don't love the responses, agree with them, don't agree with them. Our employees' perception is their reality. Their reality is what they're going home, and that's the story they're telling themselves, their spouses, their neighbors, other people asking about what it's like to work at your organization. So whether you agree with it or not, we've got to honor that. We've got to be appreciative of that and get curious, and then see what we can do to move the needle and make the team a part of the solution. Say, here's what we heard. Let's sit down as a group and you guys come up with some ideas. What could we do to move the needle here, here, here? Because if you try and come up with a prescriptive solution to address their issues, they're still not going to feel like their voice is heard. They're not going to feel like they're a part of the solution, and they won't be bought in. So that was a lot I threw at you. So I'll pause there, but we've had a ton of aha moments, kind of bright spots as we're going through each of these processes. So we're constantly learning, we're constantly tweaking and modifying. We don't sit back and rest on our laurels. We're constantly curious and trying to figure out how we can continue to improve this process. So with that, I'll pause and see what questions we may have.
Great, thanks Kevin for a great presentation. The only question that has come through, and again, if anybody has a question, please put it in the questions feature in your control panel. Just type it in. One person asked, will we get a recording of this presentation? I'd love to share this with my CEO. And the answer is you will be getting a recording within 24 hours. Everyone who attended or did not attend will receive a link to the recording. If you don't, please reach out to us, but you will get that recording. You're welcome. So if anybody does have a question, Kevin will give it about 30 seconds to a minute for people to write in their questions. If you have any, final closing thoughts.
Perfect. And I know sometimes people aren't, especially around workplace culture, aren't always comfortable posing those questions in a chat. So if you're more comfortable asking me offline, I'm happy to connect with you as well.
Great. We do have a really interesting question here. How long did it take to implement this whole concept?
Gosh, well, it depends on like the ENPS or the employee satisfaction survey. From concept to implementation, we did that very quickly. So we got buy-in, I rolled it out. We implemented that very quickly. All it took was creating the survey links, distributing those. I put a plan in place where I felt like we could maximize it. We had 44 different links that went out. We had 950 people respond, or we had 900, I'll take that back. We had 95% response rate. So 95% of our close to 900 employees took the survey and gave us feedback, which is extremely high. So there's certainly some lessons learned there. So that was quick. The core values, Kevin, I've been here 12 years. Deanna, you've been here longer than I have. Show Up, Smile, Support has been here, at the center of what we do for as long as I've been here. And so I know Kevin initially sat down when he was trying to come up with the core values and interviewed a bunch of people who he respected in the organization, had some brainstorming and ideation sessions. And so they worked over the course of several months to land on those core values, to define those. And then once they did, then it was, people were still confused about, well, I don't have a big cheesy grin and I'm not always smiling and I'm maybe a little more introverted. So I don't feel like I'm embodying the daily way of smile. And so based on that, he would say, okay, well, what is it in our world? What does it mean to smile, right? So then that was a journey as well. But once we landed on that, then it's just the consistency of the communication, the interviewing based on culture, baking it into performance reviews. So, I think it's kind of a loaded question a little bit. I guess it depends on which aspect of the presentation you're referring to, but happy to talk through if there are specific phases of that or portions of the presentation that you want to get a timeline on. I could talk through that with you as well.
Great, thanks, Kevin. We have time for one or two more questions. Some really good questions have been coming through. One of them is, what were the struggles along the way?
Yeah, I think the biggest struggle that I've seen, I've been analyzing all of our turnover data, our employee net promoter score data over the last 2 years. We have dozens of locations, right? And sometimes we're co-located with our customers. Some of them are fantastic and they're a great culture fit. Other ones are not as much of a culture fit. So that's been, from my perspective, maybe the biggest challenge of my experience in Dearborn might not feel exactly the same as somebody's experience in New York or Connecticut or Missouri or Florida or Tennessee or Pennsylvania, based on if we're co-located with our customer, who the local leader is, right? So, I think that's one of the challenges. As we get bigger, there isn't necessarily a cookie cutter approach to say, this is the answer here, 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 here. I think dissecting the data in a way that says onboarding is really important at this location, parking is really important at this location, career paths is really important at this location, workplace culture, and blending that with our customers is really important at these locations. So I think that has been the biggest challenge, and it really breaks my heart to think that somebody at one of our other locations may not have the same experience that Deanna and I have in Dearborn. So how do we replicate that and make it consistent across the board?
Thanks, Kevin. And I think we have time for one more quick question here, but this is a great one. Has this outlived any one leader? It seems like the consistency of this topic seems to depend so much on one person driving it, and it doesn't sustain over leadership changes.
Yeah, it's a great question. So our company has been around since 1979. Bob Schneider's founded the company. His son Kevin is second generation leader. So Kevin has been at the helm for a very long time. So I will say Kevin drives a lot of this. I've been, and I anticipated this question, and I've been thinking about it for our organization, right? Like, gosh, if Kevin were to leave down the road, is the next person going to come in and do these birthday cards and anniversary cards, right? And so I think you can, if you have an organization where maybe your CEO isn't hardwired or doesn't see the value, they're not going to sit down and do these things, could you kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time, where you have local leaders that see value in this and can champion? And maybe you have a leader that's doing cards for 10 different people throughout the calendar year, and another leader who's doing 5, and another leader who's doing 6. And so could you make this more bite size based on the local leaders? But I do think a lot of it, you need top-down support, but I do think it can sustain after Kevin leaves, because the show up, smile support and the daily ways and everything are so ingrained in our fabric, and we have so many long tenured employees that I don't see us kind of scrapping this and having things fall by the wayside if and when he were to leave or transition. But
Thanks,
great question.
Yeah, and I think we can now kick it over to Jessica or Mark.
All right,
Perfect.
thank you all.
Thank you, Kevin. That was a great presentation. We really appreciate you bringing this information to our employers. I wanted to just please join us for the PA CareerLinks Bucks County Grand Opening Celebration and Multi-Industry Job Fair at our new One-Stop Career Center in Trevose on September 28th. You can enjoy guided tours and refreshments while learning about the many services available on-site for job seekers and employers. Please go to www.buckscounty.gov/PA CareerLink for more information and the registration link. We hope to see you at the event. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
All right, thank you, everybody.